As moviegoers, we've all experienced those sudden jolts of fear in the darkness, those jump scares that make us lurch forward in our seats. But what if some horrors are too frightening to confront, even in the safety of a theater? What if some endings are so messed up that they're buried, never to be seen again? Today, we're diving into the chilling abyss of horror cinema to uncover the truth behind these unseen director's cuts and ask, why do some movies get buried? In an industry driven by profit, creative expression is often the first casualty. Let's look at the original, more brutal ending of Tobe Hooper's 1974 slasher flick, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In this low-budget flick, a group of unsuspecting teenagers stumble into the gruesome reality of Leatherface and his cannibalistic clan in the desolate backwoods of Texas. And while the theatrical release left audiences with a sense of relief, thanks to a last-minute car chase, the original ending was infinitely more disturbing. It was a still image of a bloodied meat hook hanging ominously over a light bulb with a single word, "Return," written below. This cryptic finale served as a reminder of the unrelenting nature of evil. It suggested that the horrors the characters had endured were not confined to that isolated farmhouse. Evil, much like the relentless Leatherface, could lurk around every corner, waiting to strike. The ambiguity was unsettling, leaving viewers to imagine the fates of the characters and perpetuating the nightmare long after the credits rolled. But why was this gut-wrenching conclusion replaced? According to reports, it wasn't because the studio thought it was too violent or too scary. In fact, it was deemed too ambiguous. The executives thought it didn't provide a clear enough resolution for the audience. They wanted something more concrete, something that tied up loose ends and provided a sense of closure. And who can blame them? A studio executive today would rather put out a sequel than let their movie end on a note of existential dread. To us horror fans, this may seem like a big mistake. After all, isn't ambiguity part of what makes horror so terrifying? But studios don't exist to make art, they exist to make money. And at the end of the day, they felt that a more ambiguous ending would leave audiences confused and dissatisfied, which is probably why they chose to replace it with something more conclusive. Now, imagine if the studio heads had faith in the director and allowed the original ending to remain. Would the film's legacy be different today? Would audiences have embraced the ambiguity, or did it rightly scare them off? It's a fascinating thought experiment. Now let's move on to another classic, Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi horror masterpiece, Alien. Sigourney Weaver stars as Ripley, an everyday space worker who finds herself humanity's last hope against a relentless, extraterrestrial creature stalking the crew of the spaceship Nostromo. And while the iconic chestburster scene in the theatrical release is horrifying enough, the original ending was infinitely more terrifying. Instead of waking up just before the ship's self-destruct sequence, Ripley was initially meant to awaken much later, only to find the entire ship destroyed and consumed by the creature. She would then realize with a growing sense of dread that she was now alone in the vast emptiness of space with no way to contact Earth and no hope of rescue. What a nightmare! So why was this nihilistic ending changed? Well, it came down to pacing. The original cut was reportedly too slow, with the audience having to endure a long period of silence as Ripley slowly realized the grim truth of her situation. Additionally, the creature was supposed to attack and kill Ripley, making for a bleak and hopeless ending. But studios don't want their heroes to lose, especially not to some creature from another world. That goes against everything they stand for. So it was decided to inject a last-minute burst of action and suspense into the film, giving Ripley a chance to escape just when it seemed like all hope was lost. But this change wasn't just about pacing and studio politics. It also had a significant impact on the film's overall themes. By having Ripley survive, the film's message shifted from one of inevitable doom to one of resilience and survival against impossible odds. It's a more optimistic and empowering message, but it certainly wasn't the original intent. Now let us take a trip through the seedy underbelly of torture porn with Eli Roth, Zest 2005 extreme horror flick, Hostel. While the theatrical version is filled with enough bloodshed and brutality to satisfy any gorehound, the original director's cut was a whole other level of depravity. As the game progressed, more and more nails were added to the gun, increasing the tension and the potential for carnage. That scene alone is enough to make you squeamish, but there were many more where that came from. And while the theatrical cut is already pretty intense, the director's cut takes things to a whole new level. So why was this cut suppressed? Well, it came down to the dreaded too gross label. While horror fans relish in the genre's ability to push boundaries and challenge norms, there is a limit. And for many, the extended sadism of Hostel's director's cut crossed that line. The film's original ending was not only more violent but also more nihilistic, leaving viewers with a sense of hopelessness and despair. It was a descent into pure evil with no room for catharsis or redemption. That kind of negativity is hard to shake off, which is probably why the film's marketing team thought it would be a bad idea to promote such a depressing ending. Imagine if this cut had been released. Would Hostel have received a different kind of notoriety? Or would it have been considered too extreme and underground even for the splatterpunk crowd? Who knows? But it's fun to speculate. These are just a few examples of the many horror films whose original endings were lost to time. But why does this happen? Why are certain endings cut from films? Is it because the filmmakers genuinely believe that some things are too scary for audiences to handle, or is it just good business to keep people coming back for more? The answer is probably a bit of both. There is a point at which pushing the envelope becomes counterproductive, resulting in lower ratings and fewer viewers. It's a fine line to walk, but it's one that the industry has become increasingly risk-averse over the years. However, some argue that this suppression of artistic expression has led to a decline in the quality of horror films. Many of today's most anticipated slashers and thrillers rely on jump scares and cheap tricks, rather than building genuine suspense and atmosphere. The result is a watered-down version of the genre that lacks the power and impact of its classic counterparts. Furthermore, the loss of these original endings has robbed us of the opportunity to see some of the greatest horror icons in their most terrifying forms. We'll never know what might have been had the original endings been left intact. Some argue that these cuts have preserved the legacy of the original vision, forcing us to confront the bleak realities of the stories head-on. But others argue that it's time to unearth these lost masterpieces and let audiences decide for themselves. After all, isn't that what horror is all about? Facing our fears and confronting the darkness within ourselves. So what do you think? Are you brave enough to seek out these uncensored versions of some of your favorite horror films? And what do you think of these films? Do you think these films would have been better if the original endings were kept in? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please like and share if you enjoyed. And as always, stay safe and don't forget, some monsters were born not made.